My stepmother handed me a special glass of wine at family dinner, but when I switched our glasses, she got the taste of her own medicine. My name is Lucas Thornberry and I'm 32 years old. 3 years ago, I sold my cybersecurity company for $4.5 million, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I bought a penthouse in downtown Portland, invested wisely, and thought I had everything figured out. What I didn't figure on was my stepmother trying to murder me for my money. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning because the ending makes a lot more sense when you understand how we got there. My mother died when I was 19, a victim of breast cancer that took her far too young. For 8 years, it was just my father David and me, two men learning to navigate life without the woman who'd been our anchor. Dad threw himself into his accounting practice, and I threw myself into building my tech company. We had dinner every Sunday, talked business, and slowly healed together. Then Vivian Blackshire entered our lives. Dad met her at a charity gala in 2019. She was 52, elegant, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of polished sophistication that turned heads at social events. She worked as an event coordinator for high-end functions, which explained her ability to charm everyone she met. Within 6 months, she'd moved into Dad's house. Within a year, they were married. At first, I was genuinely happy for them. Dad seemed lighter, more social, more engaged with life. Vivian encouraged him to travel, to enjoy his success, to live rather than just exist. She was charming to me, always asking about my business, my investments, my plans for the future. She seemed genuinely interested in becoming part of our family. "Lucas, you've built something incredible," she'd say over dinner. "Your father is so proud of you. We both are." She had a way of making you feel special, like you were the most important person in the room. I can see now that it was a skill she'd perfected, the ability to make people trust her completely. The first warning sign came from an unexpected source, my late mother's sister, Rachel. "There's something about that woman I don't trust," Rachel told me after meeting Vivian at Dad's birthday party. "She asks too many questions about money, about your business success, about family finances. It feels calculated." I brushed off Rachel's concerns. She'd always been protective of our family, and I figured she was just having trouble accepting someone new in Dad's life. Besides, Vivian had been nothing but kind to me. She remembered my favorite foods, asked thoughtful questions about my work, and seemed genuinely interested in maintaining our family closeness. I should have listened to Rachel. The first incident happened in November 2021, about 6 months after Dad and Vivian's wedding. We were having our usual Sunday dinner at Dad's house, the same house where I'd grown up, where my mother had cooked thousands of meals, where Vivian now presided as the new lady of the house. "Lucas, I made something special for you tonight," Vivian said, bringing me a glass of red wine. "It's a vintage Cabernet from a vineyard I visited last month. I thought you'd appreciate the complexity." She emphasized the word special, in a way that should have set off alarm bells, but I was touched by her thoughtfulness. The wine was rich, slightly bitter, with an aftertaste I couldn't quite identify. I complimented her choice and finished the glass. 20 minutes later, my vision began to blur. The room seemed to tilt, and my heart started racing like I'd just run a marathon. I felt nauseated, disoriented, and increasingly panicked as my body seemed to rebel against itself. "Dad," I managed to say, gripping the edge of the dining table. "Something's wrong." Vivian was immediately at my side, her face a mask of concern. "Oh my goodness, Lucas, you look terrible. David, call 911. I spent the night in the emergency room. The doctors ran every test imaginable but couldn't find anything definitively wrong. My symptoms gradually subsided, and by morning I felt weak but functional. The attending physician suggested it might have been a panic attack or possibly a reaction to something I'd eaten. Stress can manifest in surprising ways, Dr. Peterson explained. Young entrepreneurs often push themselves too hard. Maybe your body was telling you to slow down. I accepted that explanation because I wanted to believe it. The alternative, that someone had deliberately made me sick, was too disturbing to consider. Vivian was incredibly attentive during my recovery. She brought me soup, checked on me constantly, and expressed repeated concern about my health. Her caring behavior made me feel guilty for the tiny voice in my head that wondered if she'd had something to do with my illness. "I'm so worried about you," she said, sitting beside my hospital bed. "You work so hard, Lucas. Maybe this is your body's way of telling you to take better care of yourself." The second incident occurred 3 months later, during a family dinner celebrating Dad's promotion to senior partner at his accounting firm. Once again, Vivian had prepared something special for me, this time a craft cocktail she'd learned to make during a recent trip to San Francisco. It's called a blood and sand, she said, handing me the dark red drink. I thought the name was fitting for someone in your line of work. Cybersecurity is all about protecting people from digital bloodshed, right? The cocktail was complex, with layers of flavor that masked any individual component. I sipped it slowly, enjoying the conversation with Dad about his new responsibilities. But within 30 minutes, the familiar symptoms returned: dizziness, nausea, heart palpitations, and a growing sense that something was terribly wrong. This time, the emergency room visit was more serious. My blood pressure had spiked dangerously high, and my heart rhythm was irregular. I spent 2 days in the hospital while doctors tried to determine what was causing my symptoms. Mr. Thornberry, Dr. Peterson said during my second day, "We're seeing some unusual markers in your blood work. Have you been taking any new medications? Any supplements or herbal remedies?" I told him no, but his question planted a seed of suspicion that began to grow. 2 mysterious illnesses, both occurring after family dinners, both involving drinks that Vivian had specifically prepared for me. The coincidence was becoming harder to ignore. During my hospital stay, I started researching poisoning symptoms online. What I found made my blood run cold. My symptoms, dizziness, nausea, heart irregularities, confusion, could be caused by several substances that were difficult to detect in standard blood tests. When I was discharged, I made a decision that probably saved my life. I started keeping a detailed journal of every family gathering, every drink Vivian offered me, every symptom I experienced afterward. I also began researching Vivian's background more thoroughly. What I discovered was disturbing. Vivian Blackshire had been married twice before. Her first husband, a successful restaurant owner, had died of a heart attack at age 58. Her second husband, a real estate developer, had died of what was ruled a stroke at 61. Both deaths were sudden, unexpected, and occurred within 3 years of marrying Vivian. Both men had been wealthy. Both had left substantial inheritances to their wives. I hired a private investigator named Philip Carter, a former police detective who specialized in financial crimes and suspicious deaths. Within 2 weeks, Philip had uncovered a pattern that made my suspicions look conservative. "Lucas," he said during our meeting at a downtown coffee shop, "your stepmother has a very interesting history. 3 marriages, 2 dead husbands, both wealthy, both dying under circumstances that raised questions but never led to investigations." Philip spread several documents across the table. Harold Blackshire, husband number 1, died of apparent heart failure, but the autopsy showed some unusual findings that the coroner couldn't explain. Jonathan Whitmore, husband number 2, stroke, but again some anomalies in his blood chemistry that didn't quite fit the standard pattern. What kind of anomalies? Traces of substances that could have contributed to their deaths, but in concentrations that were borderline and ultimately dismissed as inconclusive. The kind of poisoning that's sophisticated enough to look natural if you don't know what to look for. Philip pulled out another file. There's more. Vivian's financial situation was uncertain before each marriage. She had significant debts, failing businesses, expensive lifestyle habits. But after each husband's death, she paid off everything and lived comfortably until the money ran out and she needed to find her next target. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Vivian was a serial killer who specialized in wealthy husbands, using slow-acting poisons to cause deaths that appeared natural. The pattern was clear. Marry money, wait for an opportune moment, eliminate the husband, inherit the wealth, repeat. But there was one crucial difference with my father's marriage. I wasn't a dependent stepchild, I was a wealthy adult with my own assets. If something happened to me, my money wouldn't go to Vivian automatically. She'd need to either become a beneficiary of my estate or find a way to convince my father that I'd want her to inherit my wealth. "She's not just targeting your father," Philip concluded. "She's targeting you too. Your wealth makes you a threat to her plans, and eliminating you would give her access to a much larger fortune." That evening, I sat in my penthouse apartment, staring out at the Portland skyline and processing the reality of my situation. My stepmother, the woman who'd been so kind to me, who'd brought warmth back into my father's life, was systematically poisoning me with the goal of inheriting my money. The next family dinner was scheduled for the following Sunday. I knew I couldn't avoid it without raising suspicions, but I also knew I couldn't keep letting Vivian poison me while I built a case against her. I needed evidence that would hold up in court, and I needed to protect myself in the process. I called Philip with my plan. "I want to catch her in the act," I said. "Set up surveillance, have toxicology equipment ready, and document everything. But this time, when she tries to poison me, she's going to get a taste of her own medicine." Philip was silent for a long moment. "Lucas, that's extremely dangerous." If something goes wrong. If I don't do this, she'll keep trying until she succeeds. And then she'll move on to my father. I won't let that happen. The plan was simple but required precise timing. Marcus would position surveillance equipment around Dad's house to record everything that happened. I would wear a wire to capture conversations. When Vivian offered me a drink, I would find a way to switch our glasses so that she would consume whatever poison she'd prepared for me. The risks were enormous. If I mistimed the switch, I could end up poisoned again. If Vivian realized what was happening, she might become violent or find another way to eliminate me. But the alternative, continuing to be slowly murdered while building a legal case, seemed worse. Sunday arrived gray and cold, with the kind of Pacific Northwest drizzle that makes everything feel ominous. I drove to Dad's house with my heart pounding, knowing that this dinner would either end Vivian's murderous career or potentially cost me my life. Dad answered the door with his usual warm smile. "Lucas, perfect timing. Vivian's been cooking all afternoon, she has something special planned." There was that word again, special. I hugged Dad, noting how healthy and happy he looked. Whatever Vivian was doing to me, she hadn't started poisoning him yet. That gave me hope that I could stop her before she expanded her target list. "David, pour Lucas some wine," Vivian called from the kitchen. "I'll bring his special glass in just a moment." My blood chilled. She was already preparing my drink, already adding whatever substance she'd chosen for tonight's attempt. I sat at the dining table, trying to appear relaxed while my mind raced through the logistics of the switch. Vivian emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 glasses of red wine. She handed one to me with her usual bright smile. "This is a particularly nice vintage," she said, "from a small winery in Sonoma. I thought you'd enjoy something with a bit more complexity than usual." I accepted the glass, noting that it looked identical to the one she kept for herself. The wine was dark red, almost black, with no visible signs of contamination. Whatever she'd added was tasteless and colorless, the mark of an experienced poisoner. "Thank you, Vivian. You always think of everything." She smiled, clearly pleased with herself. "I just want you to feel appreciated, Lucas. Family is so important." The irony was staggering. She was talking about family while actively trying to murder me. Dad launched into a story about a difficult client, giving me the cover I needed to execute the switch. When he mentioned needing to get something from his office, I seized the moment. "I'll help you find it," I said, standing up and accidentally bumping the table. In the confusion of steadying the table and our drinks, I quickly switched our glasses. The movement was subtle, practiced. I'd rehearsed it dozens of times in my apartment. When Dad returned, we all raised our glasses in a toast. "To family," Vivian said, looking directly at me. "To family," I agreed, watching as she took a substantial sip of what she thought was her wine but was actually the poison drink she'd prepared for me. For the next 20 minutes, I pretended to drink while actually just wetting my lips with the wine. Vivian, meanwhile, finished nearly half her glass while chatting about her recent shopping trip and upcoming social events. I watched her carefully, looking for the first signs that the poison was taking effect. She timed her previous attempts to coincide with the end of dinner, probably to ensure I'd consumed the full dose before symptoms appeared. 25 minutes after the toast, Vivian paused mid-sentence. "I feel a bit." She touched her forehead, her eyes suddenly unfocused. "Are you okay, honey?" Dad asked, immediately concerned. "I'm just dizzy." Vivian gripped the edge of the table, her face pale. "And my heart is racing." I leaned forward, feigning concern while feeling a mixture of vindication and horror. "Those are the same symptoms I had during my hospital visits." Vivian's eyes snapped to mine, and for just a moment, I saw recognition flash across her face. She knew what had happened. She knew I'd switched the glasses. And she knew she'd just consumed her own poison. "David," she whispered, her breathing becoming labored. "Call 911. Something's wrong." As Dad rushed to the phone, Vivian looked at me with pure hatred. "You," she managed to say. "Me what?" I asked calmly. But she couldn't respond. The poison was working too quickly. Her body began to convulse, and she collapsed onto the dining room floor, her carefully applied makeup smearing as her face hit the hardwood. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes. As the paramedics worked to stabilize Vivian, I noticed Philip Reed watching from across the street. Our surveillance equipment had captured everything. Vivian preparing my drink in the kitchen, her confident demeanor during dinner, her collapse after consuming the poison she'd intended for me. At the hospital, Vivian's blood work told the complete story. She'd ingested a substantial dose of oleander extract, a plant-based poison that causes exactly the symptoms I'd experienced during my previous illnesses. The concentration was high enough to cause serious cardiac irregularities and potentially death. Mr. Thornberry, Detective Sarah Walsh said when she interviewed me the following day, "We need to understand what happened at that dinner." I told her everything. The previous poisoning incidents, my investigation into Vivian's background, Philip Reed's findings about her deceased husbands, and my plan to catch her in the act by switching our drinks. You're saying you deliberately allowed your stepmother to poison herself? I'm saying I prevented her from poisoning me by ensuring she consumed her own medicine. Everything she experienced was intended for me. The evidence was overwhelming. The surveillance footage showed Vivian preparing my drink separately from the others. The toxicology reports proved she'd ingested a lethal dose of oleander. Philip's investigation revealed the pattern of suspicious deaths among her previous husbands. When confronted with the evidence, Vivian's facade finally cracked. Faced with attempted murder charges and a potential death penalty case, she agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for a plea deal. Her confession was chilling in its calculated precision. Harold was supposed to die quickly, she told investigators, referring to her first husband. But the dosage was wrong and he lingered for days. I learned to be more accurate after that. She'd poisoned her second husband, Jonathan, with a combination of digitalis and potassium, substances that caused a stroke-like cardiac event that appeared natural. She'd been planning to use a similar method on my father once she'd eliminated me. Lucas was the obstacle, she explained. With his money tied up in trusts and investments, I needed him gone before I could access David's wealth cleanly. The plan was to poison Lucas first, then help David through his grief while positioning myself as the beneficiary of both estates. The investigation into her previous husband's deaths was reopened based on her confession. Exhumation and advanced toxicology testing confirmed that both men had been poisoned. Vivian Blackshire wasn't just an attempted murderer, she was a serial killer who'd been operating for over a decade. Dad was devastated when he learned the truth. The woman he'd fallen in love with, the person he'd trusted with his heart and his home, had been systematically planning to murder both of us for our money. How did I not see it? He asked me as we sat in my apartment after Vivian's arrest. How could I have been so blind? She was good at what she did, I replied. This wasn't her first time manipulating someone. You couldn't have known. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Vivian's defense team argued that she'd been psychologically damaged by childhood trauma and financial instability, but the evidence of premeditation was too strong. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on multiple counts of first-degree murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dad sold the house where he'd lived with Vivian, unable to bear the memories of sharing his home with a killer. He moved into a smaller place closer to downtown, somewhere without the weight of deception and betrayal. I keep thinking about all the meals she cooked, he told me one evening. All the time she insisted on preparing my coffee or bringing me a drink. Was she testing poisons on me too? Medical tests showed that Dad had indeed been exposed to small amounts of various toxins over the months of his marriage, but not enough to cause permanent damage. Vivian had apparently been saving the lethal doses for when she was ready to make her move. The case attracted national media attention. The Black Widow of Portland became a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting too quickly and the sophisticated methods modern killers use to avoid detection. For me, the experience was transformative in ways I hadn't expected. Surviving a murder attempt changes your perspective on life, on trust, and on the importance of listening to your instincts. Rachel's early warnings about Vivian had been accurate, but I dismissed them because I wanted to believe in the happy family narrative. I established a foundation focused on supporting families affected by domestic violence and financial exploitation. Too many people, especially elderly individuals, become targets for predators who exploit family relationships for financial gain. My experience with Vivian taught me that evil can wear the mask of love and care. Dad and I rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual support. The shared trauma of Vivian's betrayal brought us closer together, and we learned to trust each other's judgment in ways we hadn't before. You saved both our lives, Dad told me on the first anniversary of Vivian's conviction. If you hadn't figured out what she was doing, we saved each other, I corrected. You taught me to be suspicious of people's motives. That's what kept me alive long enough to expose her. The most satisfying part of the entire ordeal was knowing that Vivian's carefully planned scheme had backfired completely. She'd spent months positioning herself to inherit millions of dollars, and instead she'd earned herself a life sentence in prison. Her overconfidence in her ability to control situations had been her downfall. Today, I live in a restored brownstone in Portland's Pearl District. I've started a new company focused on cybersecurity for healthcare institutions, partly inspired by my experience with medical poisoning and the need to protect patient data from digital predators who are just as dangerous as the physical ones. Dad visits every Sunday for dinner. We cook together, share stories, and maintain the family traditions that Vivian tried to destroy. But we're also more careful now, more aware of the signs that someone might be exploiting our trust. I kept one of Vivian's wine glasses as a reminder, not of her attempted murder, but of the importance of staying vigilant. It sits on my desk, a small crystal monument to the power of turning someone's weapon against them. The glass reminds me that sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to someone else, it's letting them destroy themselves with their own poison. When people ask me about that night, about the moment I switched our glasses, I tell them this: Vivian spent months carefully planning my death, measuring doses, timing attacks, perfecting her method. But she made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was a passive victim who would never fight back. She was wrong. Have you ever suspected a family member or close friend of trying to harm you? How do you balance trust with self-protection when it comes to people you love? Do you think Lucas was right to let Vivian poison herself? Or should he have found another way to expose her crimes? Let me know what you would have done if you discovered someone was slowly murdering you for your money. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next chilling story. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who call you family.